Alright, I think enough time has passed. I've had a chance to watch both series in their entirety, and now I'm going to determine if Dragon Ball Daima is better than Dragon Ball GT. Both series build off of the extreme commercial and critical success of Dragon Ball Z, but take a different approach in how they tell their stories. So I think the first place to compare the two is in their setups. Dragon Ball GT and Dragon Ball Daima both kick off with major shakeups, but the way they introduce their conflicts and world building sets them apart. GT immediately goes for a galactic adventure setup, throwing Goku, Pan, and Trunks into space, while Daima leans into a more mystical element that had only been mentioned in Dragon Ball Z. But before we get too deep into the contrast, let's break down each series setup and how they handle similar ideas. Dragon Ball GT wastes no time introducing a completely new goal, the Black Star Dragon Balls. In the first episode, we learned that unlike the standard Dragon Balls, these come with a severe consequence. After being used, they scatter across the galaxy, and if not gathered within a year, the Earth explodes. The twist? Pilaf accidentally wishes Goku back into a child, setting the stage for a back to the basics adventure that ironically feels more like classic Dragon Ball than the later arcs of Z. The early GT setup is really simple. Find the Dragon Balls, save the Earth. There's a built-in timer that keeps things moving, but at this point in the story, there's no singular villain. Sure, we run into obstacles like Legic, Cardinal Muchi Muchi, and the Para brothers, but GT's setup is about exploration first, major conflict second. It's not until Dr. Mew is introduced when we start shifting towards a more Dragon Ball Z type of conflict with an actual mastermind pulling the strings. Daima plays its cards differently though. Instead of a tangible quest, the core mystery initially revolves around an unexplained transformation, not just for Goku, but seemingly the entire main cast. Unlike GT, where Goku is the only one de-aged, Daima shrinks nearly all major characters and forces them to adapt. Instead of looking outward like GT's space adventure, Daima's setup leans inward in understanding the cause of the problem first, then stopping whoever is responsible. And while GT's stakes are immediate, Daima's stakes are more mysterious. The story doesn't give us a clear ticking clock like GT, but we quickly learn that the demon world plays a major role. And of course, the major issue that the demon world played a hand in was the main cast being turned into younger versions of themselves. GT and Daima both play with de-aging, but their approaches couldn't be more different. GT's Goku as a kid gimmick is mostly an aesthetic change. He's still ridiculously strong, he can still use Super Saiyan normally, and there's also a time skip between Z and GT, and Goku is much stronger than he was against Buu, so he doesn't truly struggle until he gets to Baby. There's a slight handicap effect, but GT doesn't fully commit to making it a meaningful limitation. If anything, the only time his kid body really feels like a detriment is when he tries to access Super Saiyan 3, as his smaller body can't maintain the transformation well, but if we're being honest, his adult body couldn't maintain the transformation well either. Daima, on the other hand, takes the concept further by de-aging almost the entire cast. In this series, it isn't just a visual change, it affects their power too. And unlike GT's Goku, who remains probably the strongest being in the universe, Daima's characters actually struggle in ways they wouldn't as adults. Goku has to get used to using this body. Accessing his Super Saiyan forms is genuinely a challenge for him. The series makes it a big deal when Goku finally accesses Super Saiyan for the first time, and decisions like that give Daima storytelling potential that is much greater than in GT. I think it could have been taken a little further if the de-aging was also mental, but I think what we got was just fine. But the biggest differences in each series setup was GT's story direction was largely predictable after the first few episodes. Once you understood the Dragon Ball hunt, you knew what was coming. Daima, I didn't fully know where it was going, and that's what made it interesting. From Glorio's involvement, to Arensu's, to the new Majins, Goma, there were many different elements at play, and because of the mystery that was added, I'm taking Daima when it comes to the setup. Now here's one thing everyone who watches Dragon Ball must know. Dragon Ball was, is, and will always be the story of Goku. But the way a series utilizes its cast can make or break its appeal. Both GT and Daima are starting from a post-Dragon Ball Z point. So to me, the question isn't about how these characters grow as much as it's about how these characters are used. And boy, do GT and Daima take vastly different approaches when it comes to that. Like I said before, Dragon Ball is the story of Goku, and I don't think any Dragon Ball series should try to steer away from that. But GT embraces that idea a little too much. The moment Pilaf makes his wish is the moment GT becomes a one-man show. Pan and Trunks are there, but Goku is the driving force behind everything. He fights all of the major battles, he's the one who constantly overcomes impossible odds, and when it comes down to it, he's the only one who really matters. And GT's later arcs make this even clearer. Super Saiyan 4 is the ultimate example of Goku's dominance. Vegeta eventually gets it too, but only after needing a machine to forcefully power him up. Even Oob, who was literally meant to be Goku's successor, is sidelined immediately. GT isn't interested in passing the torch, it's making sure Goku holds it until the very end, and I don't have a problem with that, but just don't make it seem like it was supposed to be something else, because Daima doesn't make the same mistake. Goku is still the main character, obviously, but the fact that the entire cast is de-aged means that other characters will actually be dealing with the same core problem. He isn't just carrying a weaker Trunks and Pan through an adventure, he's gonna actually need help, and that changes the dynamics completely. Glorio, Pansy, Vegeta, Bulma, Piccolo, and others have meaningful roles, which is much more than what GT gave most of its returning characters. Vegeta's fight against the second Tamagami is better than any Vegeta moment in GT, and I'm willing to argue that with anyone. But let's go deeper. How do the side characters in each series actually hold up? Well, for GT it's rough, there's no other way to put it. I think the side characters might be the series' biggest issue because aside from Pan and Trunks, almost nobody outside of Goku has any real presence. And even then, Trunks spends half of the adventure feeling like he doesn't want to be there, and Pan gets the same sidekick treatment that Bulma got in early Dragon Ball, even though Pan's role in the story should have been much different based on her heritage alone. Daima introduces some original characters that add some personality. Glorio goes from a character who is skeptical about Goku and his friends to someone who is in absolute awe of their power. He transforms from a character with questionable intentions to a character that betrays his master in order to do the right thing. Watching Pansy being able to explore her world with Goku was a treat. She has a curiosity for life similar to Goku. Character utilization goes to Daima as well. Now this section is probably the easiest to break down and see which one is better, and that's going to be the art and animation. Now it's inherently a little unfair to compare the two. Dragon Ball GT and Daima were both released weekly, but Daima had the luxury of its team having a schedule that gave them more than enough time to finish these episodes. I'm not sure exactly when production for GT started, but the GT anime started in the same year Dragon Ball Z's anime ended, and I assume GT began production around the time Z ended. Daima was finished before it even aired, and because it was a celebration for the 40th anniversary of Dragon Ball, some of the best animators were involved. Chikashi Kubota, Katsuyoshi Nakatsuru, Naohiro Shintani, Yuya Takahashi, and Tadayoshi Yamamuro all had something to do with Daima, and it was only 20 episodes. Dragon Ball GT had its moments, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that every other episode was iffy at best. Daima gets this one too. Now I know I'm giving every point to Daima, but this next one isn't so easy of a decision. Since Dragon Ball Z, this franchise has been almost exclusively about action. And with action stories, you normally have two sides, the good guys and the bad guys. And throughout Dragon Ball, the good guys have been pretty consistent in terms of their quality, and a big reason for that is because they've been the same group of characters. But the quality of a series' antagonist has always varied in the Dragon Ball franchise, and Daima is no exclusion. I'm not really going to talk about the Tamagamis here, I don't really view them as antagonists, but Daima really pulled a bait and switch with the new Majins, and that frustrated me. The way Arinsu and Glorio were initially framed made it seem like they were going to be a true secondary threat that could add depth to the conflict, and the new Majins were a big part of that. But seeing how they just ended up essentially failures was a letdown, and then their shift from potential antagonists to allies felt way too abrupt. Enemies have always become allies in Dragon Ball, I don't have a problem with that, but it normally happens over time. In Daima, it feels like it was crammed in at the last second, and I think pacing is the big issue here. If this twist had happened earlier, there would have been more time to sit with it, maybe even build some tension around why they were helping rather than just flipping sides instantly. But because it happened so late in the 20 episode series, I think it was like the writers just needed to clear them out of the way so the focus could be on Goma. And speaking of Goma, yeah man, he's just another strong for the sake of being strong villain, which is getting exhausting. He had no interesting ideology, no deeper goal, just another roadblock for the Z fighters to punch through. If Arinsu and Glorio had remained threats with their own agendas, it could have made for a much more unpredictable story, but instead, we got another one-dimensional powerhouse that didn't really leave a lasting impact. I simply can't say the same about GT. GT has one really good antagonist and another solid one with a very good concept. I don't know if I'd agree, but a really good argument could be made that Baby is a top 4 to 6 Dragon Ball antagonist ever. He had a solid background, a genuinely interesting motivation, and a unique set of abilities. Even Super 17, no, I'm just playing. Omega Shenron, I mean, just the Shadow Dragons in general was a good concept. The execution was shaky, but I mean, that's really the story of GT. Comparing antagonists between these two series isn't fair. One is clearly better than the other, and that's GT. Now, the last aspect I'll compare between these two series is the power scaling and transformations. But if we're being honest, this is really a conversation of which Super Saiyan 4 you like more. Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta was cool to see, but it's secondary compared to Super Saiyan 4. Now, from an aesthetic standpoint, I think both variations have their positives. For Daima, I like that the form can be utilized in his younger body, and I also like the color choices. From the fur to the hair color to the eye color, I like how uniform it is. For GT, I enjoyed the process to achieve the form. I think Super Saiyan 3 is as far as the golden haired form should have gone, and with GT having a different tone, Super Saiyan 4 was introduced at the perfect time, and I think Daima should have incorporated needing to become a great ape to achieve the form. In both series, it's obvious that the form takes on attributes of an ape. I mean, even more so for Daima. With the big hands, long arms, and running on all fours, I'd rather see a great ape transformation to get there, rather than us seeing Never bring the power out of him, and later learning that Goku just trained really hard because Buu was so strong. So GT gets another point from me when it comes to power-ups and forms introduced. So let's go over this. The setup goes to Daima. Character utilization goes to Daima. Art and animation goes to Daima. Antagonist goes to GT. And power-ups and transformations is close, but I give that to GT as well. That's 3-2 in Daima's favor, and I agree with that. Dragon Ball Daima is better than Dragon Ball GT. It's a funky comparison because one is 64 episodes and the other is 20, and more so meant to be a celebration of the franchise. But even if you take the best 20 episode section of Dragon Ball GT and compare it to Daima, I still think Daima is better. But let me know in the comments what you think. With that being said, this is Big Toon, and thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.